Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of the 11th of November 2020. You'll probably hear from my gruffness in my voice. I'm still recovering from a quite a serious chest infection, so if I suddenly go silent and cough, you'll understand why. Obviously, due to the current pandemic and the government guidance on social distancing and COVID-19, members of the public and press will not be able to attend, obviously, the offices. So everything is going to be done online. So I'd like to thank all members who are here this evening. Just to be clear, already I am suffering from very poor connectivity. So again, if I or any other member is thrown out or loses connectivity, just feel free to rejoin as and when. So I'll move on to the agenda. Apologies for absence. I've had apologies for absence from Councillor Coxall and Councillor Andrew Jeffries. Is there any other apologies for absence, Lucy?
No, none received.
None, thank you very much. Move to item 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting, which could be found on the agenda pack, pages 5 to 12. I'm going to move those as is. Have anyone got any statements or questions in relation to the minutes? Agreed. Shaking heads. So I'll move that they be agreed. Is that all agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3, items of urgent business. I've received no items of urgent business in relation to the meeting this evening. Moving on to, excuse me, declarations of interest. Excuse me, has anyone got any declarations of interest in relation to the items that are here in front of us this evening? Again, I'm seeing a collective shake of heads, so I'll put that as none. I have tried to shorten my leader speech today, so apologies. I have, as we normally know, I normally put the clean it, cut it, fill it updates for each month, but I've cut them out along with a number of the items, so apologies if anyone feels that that's lacking. I can get those circulated to people as soon as possible, should they require them. So today's Armistice Day, when we remember and give thanks to everyone who sacrificed so much to guarantee our freedoms. This year is especially significant as it's 75, sorry, 75th Armistice Day since the Second World War, and indeed, as we saw today, 100 years since the interment of the unknown warrior. Remembrance this year has been unlike any other that I've ever experienced, and it's entirely fitting that we should honour our generation while in the way that we can by helping protect those most vulnerable, and have done this on an individual basis. But despite the restrictions, the local Broad British Legion made sure we had a superb, safe, low-key service to show the borough's gratitude on Sunday. That was hosted by the Reverend Canon Barlow at St Peter's and Paul's Church in Grays. It was an excellent virtual meeting, service, sorry. It is available on the internet and has already been viewed by 200 people. I have to say, I logged on for it. It was very well conducted, and I've passed on my thanks to both Royal British Legion and indeed Reverend Barlow for the great work they did in such difficult circumstances. As we know, last week the whole country went back into lockdown as we've had to take drastic action to bring the infection rate from COVID-19 under control to protect the NHS and indeed to save lives. Very simply, we must all stay at home and only go out for specific reasons such as shopping for necessities like food and medicine, going to work where it's not possible to work from home, for students to go to school or college, and indeed for anyone to go out outside for exercise. That is, of course, heavily caveated with not mixing with households, even if they are your family, and indeed when exercising outdoor, only meeting one other person outside of your family that you live with. I must urge that our residents follow the advice and stick to the new rules. We do the weekly update newsletter. So if any resident still hasn't subscribed to that, I would suggest that they do so as soon as possible. Is sent out to over 100,000 email addresses across the borough and indeed outside of the borough. And I believe the week before last, we had over 90,000 people open and check the email to see what we're doing in Thurrock, which is really good news, as it's getting the messages out there, not just from myself, but obviously other cabinet members as well, in what we need to do during the lockdown. As we know, the lockdown is for a month, and hopefully after the end of that month, we'll go into a new tiered alert system, which is yet to be announced. However, as we don't know what that will be as yet, we all need to do our bit and play our part to bring the infection rate down and the positive test rate down in Thurrock. It's up to us all to stick to the rules, practice social distancing, practice hands, face and space, and make sure that we do absolutely everything to reduce the reinfection rate. I would obviously urge everyone not only just to use, not only to practice the social distancing rules and rules that our government have provided for us to help bring the infection rate down, but also to use their common sense when they're out and about for the common good of everyone in Thurrock. We're doing a really good job so far in Thurrock, and I think we just need to sort of really buckle it down for this next couple of weeks and make sure that we go into the lowest tier possible when we come out of this lockdown. Since the start of the pandemic, Thurrock Council's received over £102 million worth of government support for residents, businesses, and to the council for the whole of this year. This includes £79 million for our local businesses in grants and business rates. We've also learned this week that the council's received an extra £523,000 from the government to help provide support for families with children and other vulnerable households and individuals with food and energy and water bills this year. I'm also going to thank in advance all those that have volunteered and have stepped forward to help support those that are will have to remain at home, for those that are medically extremely vulnerable, or those who just really cannot get out for medical reasons. It's not just helping with the obvious, like shopping or picking up medication, but in some cases it may be the only friendly face that some people will see in the next couple of weeks. So our volunteers worked exceptionally hard during lockdown 1, and I'm sure they'll work equally as hard in lockdown 2. I just hope that we do everything to avoid them having to work hard again in lockdown 3 by there not being one. But playing our part as well, we've also had to be very tough on those that have been breaking the rules, not just in relation to COVID, but on a number of issues. We've had unscrupulous landowners in Buckles Lane that have been forced to pay tens of thousands of pounds in costs and return the green space and the green belt back to its original state after court injunctions were found in our favour for land that's both north and south of Buckles Lane, and they decided to do unapproved works on the land to try and develop them for their own use. That's cost them, as I say, tens of thousands of pounds. Also, they had to cover the entire council's legal bills in relation to this, as well as having to redo the damage that they've caused on the Greenbelt. We did promise we'll take action to tackle the decades of unchecked development on this site, and this is the first of many such actions that we will probably have to take to finally resolve this issue. Secondly, a rogue landlord has been forced to pay out more than £18,000 in fines and costs whilst their company was letting out undersized rooms to tenants in Thurrock. We previously issued civil penalty notices to Palmview Estates, and after we failed to take action on them, we took them to court to stand up for the rights of our residents to live in a decent-sized home. These fines will need to be paid by the company and indeed the owner who decided to rent out these properties and not take heed of our notices to correct his ways. And finally, and back on to helping with the enforcement regarding coronavirus restrictions. The organiser of a Halloween party in Pilgrim Lane traveller site now faces a large fine and possibly eviction after they held a party for more than 50 people on the 31st of October. After telling police officers saw them erect a marquee on the Friday before that they would abandon the plans for the party, they actually moved the marquee to an area where they hoped it wouldn't be seen. Unfortunately for them, it was. And the police were called and had to deal with quite a difficult situation, but eventually dispersed and made arrests, and questions are ongoing. Party organisers were given the opportunity to do the right thing by the police and by the council, but decided to do the complete opposite. We will continue to work with Essex Police to make sure they face the full force of the law, not just them, but anybody else who flouts the restrictions that are put on to help bring down the rates of infection across the country. And finally, I'd like to wish good luck to two of my Cabinet colleagues that are here this evening, who have been nominated for the prestigious Local Government Information Unit Councillor Awards. Councillor Hoolin is the finalist for the Community Champion category, and Councillor Hebb has been shortlisted for the Finance and Economic Development category. Both of them have done an excellent job in the portfolios up to the end of obviously last year, and even more so through the pandemic, as both of those being heavily impacted on the finance front, and indeed on the way that our community is pulled together to rally around each other in Thurrock. We will learn if they've won the virtual awards ceremony, which takes place on the 26th of November. As I say, I would normally do the Clinic affiliate updates, but I will supply those figures separately at a later stage. So I'm now going to move to briefings on policy, budget and other issues. Are there any briefings on policy and budget, other issues that need to be raised this evening that are not part of the agenda? Again, I'm seeing collective shaking of heads. Thank you. I'm going to move to item 7, which is the petitions submitted by members of the public. Lucy, do we have any petitions from members of the public?
No.
Excuse me. Thank you. And do we have any questions from non-executive members? Sorry.
No, not tonight.
None this evening. Moving on to matters referred to the Cabinet for consideration by overview of the Scrutiny Committee. Only those that are already in the agenda. Other than that, we have none. So I will move to item 10, which is on the paper, which is pages 13 to 16. I'd like to first of all thank Councillor Massey, who's the chair, for attending this evening. Excuse me, and I'd like to hand over to Councillor Massey. Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Cabinet. I understand it's been some time since a report to Cabinet from the Lower Thames Crossing Task Force was delivered by the Chair, so I'd briefly like to run through the Task Force description from the terms of reference. They are to create a responsive working group to discuss and make recommendations in relation to the environmental, economic and social aspects of the Lower Thames Crossing. As Chair since July, I fully respect the Task Force terms of reference, so I'm very pleased to bring you this report this evening. I'll run through some of the key points from the meetings in 2020. So in February, whilst the world was waking up slowly from the COVID-19 pandemic, Highways England held a supplementary consultation, which ran into late March. Highways England then presented to the Task Force to propose changes, and these changes were discussed in detail by the Task Force. In March, the Council's response was agreed by the Task Force and approved by the General Services Committee. Fast forward a few months due to the pandemic, in July, I was elected as the Chair, and during the July meeting, Highways England presented design refinement changes. Residents and interested parties were given 30 days until the 12th of August to make comment. This was during the national and international background of the COVID-19 restrictions. Highways England were invited again in September to present and provide feedback on the changes arising from the refinement consultation. These included acoustic barriers and utility locations, which, although the further detail was welcomed by the Task Force, we generally felt it could have been released by Highways England earlier in the process. In October, the task force asked for 2 reports from officers: a Thurrock Health Impact Assessment and a further report relating to the Emerging Economic Impact Phase 2 work and summary mitigation list. These reports prompted some interesting debates and comments. In regards to the health impact assessment, the council is still lacking a lot of baseline data from Highways England to provide further details to members. This will be reviewed further when documents are made public from the DCO, which was submitted by Highways England on the 23rd of October. The economic impact work and summary mitigation list was discussed in detail by the task force. And although the November task force was cancelled due to the DCO submission workload, a briefing was held virtually for task force members to discuss these points and the next steps and aims of the task force in the future. At the briefing, it was agreed by a great majority of the task force membership to align with other local authorities to position of constructive opposition to see what mitigation and benefit could be achieved for Thurrock and its residents from the LTC scheme. We intend to hold our last task force meeting in December. By then, we hope to have more information from the DCO documentation available. And the task force finally would be very interested to understand the Cabinet view on moving position with regards to the LTC. This concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massey, and thanks for basically whizzing through an entire year's worth of report there. It is great to see, as I say, see the chair of the committee in front of us, and that was the point of one of the many points of it being set up in the first place. So I'm going to open it up to if any members got any questions, if they haven't already asked Councillor Massey or not fully aware of the work that's been done. So members, any questions? Again, I'm seeing a collective shaking of heads if you can't see that, Councillor Massey. So from my point of view, as I say, it's absolutely great to see the chair here, and hopefully that every time there is a need for an update that you'll be here and made available. As we know, this is now going forward with the DCO process, so there will be a period of time where it stays in limbo for a bit, but that really shouldn't stop the meeting continuing. Certainly, I know there are outstanding items such as mitigation and, as I say, the environmental report that you brought to our attention. So with that, we've got one recommendation that Cabinet notes the work of the task force. I don't think it should just be note. I think it should be notes and thanks the task force for their work. So with that slight amendment, are we all agreed with that?
Agreed.
Again, a collective nodding ahead or thumbs up. So thank you very much. Councillor Massey, you're of course more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, should you wish. And if you don't, please enjoy your evening. And again, thank you for your report. Moving on to item 11, which is the waste strategy update. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Watkins. So, Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Leader. Leader, tonight I present to you the work of the Cross-Party Waste Working Group, led by Councillor Fletcher, and had the following members from Labour, Conservatives and Thurrock Independent parties: Councillor Byrne, Councillor Smith, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Muldowney, Councillor Van Day, Councillor Ralph, and previously Councillor Akinbowen and Councillor Collins. I'd like to thank each of these members for their contribution to this group over the previous 18 months. Their suggestions and challenging conversations have been robust and delivered a strategy that can see substantial improvements to our recycling rates and environmental improvements in Thurrock, matching our desire to be more environmentally friendly, doing our bit for the planet, ensuring that all the three parties came together to discuss and deliver a strategy that would both be acceptable and recycling first focused. As I mentioned in the last meeting, Leader, we have seen a continued focus from opposition groups on the importance of ensuring that we are being more climate focused, and this forms a significant part of that. Leader, this strategy, which has been agreed by all 6 members of the Cross-Party Waste Working Group, also passed through the CGS committee on October 1st, where the recommendation to approve 2A and the overall strategy was agreed. Within Thurrock, we have been presented with a big challenge which has stemmed back to 2014, by which we have seen continued downward trend with recycling rates, which have accelerated during the lockdown and have continued to reduce significantly. Since this period, and I'm talking about 2014, both us and the previous administration have come up with new ways to try and improve recycling, and to name some of those. New borough-wide marketing was launched and completed, multiple leaflet drops, information drops and educational events. New social media strategies were put in place, school roadshows, and most recently the communal bin stores have been rolling out. Social housing has now been completed, as was announced yesterday, and phase 2, the private dwellings, will be coming in early 2021. As part of the work the working group have done, the consultation that took place at the start of this year also had a side aim of promoting recycling. We know the importance of recycling. It helps the environment, it allows us to slow climate change, and it's a collective responsibility of everyone to do it. And this is why the working group was created. As part of this new waste contracts, how can we as a collective group work to improve recycling and ensure that we increase for all the benefits it has, but additionally to reach the government 50% target, which was to be by 2020. And this is something I stressed a group which was not influenced by the executive, was created and focused on only improving recycling rates. The waste group have met numerous times over the previous months and have visited the recycling centre in Bywaters, have held numerous meetings and discussions alongside a consultation that took place at the start of 2020, with over £30,000 invested in promoting a consultation, asking for residents' feedback on how they currently see recycling, the future, and much more. The feedback was received and was included in the strategy, and I believe was fully taken into account when devising what is suggested this evening. With a recycling improvement focus, the waste group came forward with option 2A, which was to see the best way of improving recycling on a mass scale. Other options and other areas were discussed by the group. Across all the options available, it would seem that this would ensure we saw a significant rise in our recycling rates as a borough without having a huge impact on residents, and 2A suggests the following: a continued weekly recycling collection, a bi-weekly refuse collection, a bi-weekly garden waste collection, and a new weekly food waste collection, with all residents receiving a new bin for food waste. Projections show that we could see a recycling rate of 54% compared to the current 33.86% we have as per the Q2 report that was presented this evening by Councillor Hewlin. Residents will still receive a weekly recycling collection for 2 of the streams, with recycling being the main one, with these bins which should be the fullest each week. If 2A was to be approved this evening, we could see a recycling increase above 64%. This is good for the residents in terms of the environmental improvements, it's good for the planet and good for the council, both in terms of the recycling improvements, but also savings which are now considered due to the COVID impact. And this is why tonight, Leader, I am asking for Cabinet to support the working group in accepting 2A. I wanted to raise something important and something that has been expressed to the working group and to CGS, and also more importantly to the staff. Any change to the collection regime will require a review of resource, but we remain confident that this can be achieved without significant implications on our permanent workforce if the recommended proposal is implemented. Should this result in a reduction in our workforce, this will be mitigated through a freeze on recruitment to ensure vacant posts, there are currently 13 as an example, are held until clear what resources are needed to deliver our new service. We will continue to backfill vacancies with agency workers until the final resource requirements are clear, so that no immediate change in numbers. We therefore are confident this will have a minimal impact on job roles. And to qualm something which was also raised at CGS, the waste service is demand-led, and through the local plan and future developments, where there is a need, the service will be increased to match that new demand. And I wanted to talk about the bi-weekly refuse collection, which again, I know has obviously raised some questions. This report this evening is very different to the initial one, which was provided back in October. Whilst the strategy is the same, it is important to reflect questions that have been raised since its public release in areas that did not bounce straight out of the document. I've seen questions raised and asked, but these are captured within the report, which I believe they are now. And there's also a new appendix, which was delivered this evening to members, who again is starting to form an FAQ basis, so that again the questions which have been asked already can be answered, and again as questions come through, these will equally be answered. And there's 18 months I will also add of implementation to come. So with all the questions which should be and rightfully received over this period of time, and there's been really good ones from members and from residents over recent weeks, such as medical waste, such as larger families, such as communal abodes, which have all been discussed about and have already started to be answered within the FAQs. But I wanted to talk about why it's being considered. Research conducted by the team delivered to the working group has shown implementation is being discussed tonight, and the implementation across councils and the direction the world is going, it does mean that more and more things are recyclable. More should be recycled, and changes like this have seen a significant change in behaviour. The recycling bin should be the fullest bin of the week, with the general waste being released where possible. And where councils have implemented changes like this, they have seen wholesale change in recycling behaviour, and that is one of the key points to this. For all the work we have done over the previous years to try and encourage and educate, we have not seen a success with recycling. This was discussed to the working group and formed a significant point in their conclusions in suggesting 2A. But we will continue to buck the trend on what other councils do, as we always do in Thurrock, and we'll continue to offer a weekly recycling collection and a weekly food waste collection. And if you were to look at page 21 of the agenda this evening, you will see that there are two councils, two councils out of the list provided, Three Rivers and North East Somerset, as examples, but actually do offer the 2A, let's call it, offer, and I've actually seen recycling rates increase in excess of 60%. I want to stress here that I agree with the working group that moving to a bi-weekly recycling will have a significant impact on the council and its teams, residents, and whilst other councils may do it and have seen improvements, we can still achieve the same results by only focusing on our refuse and keeping a weekly recycling. And we should see a significant improvement. Over the coming months, I can assure residents we will ensure that every resident is fully informed on the changes in an extensive communications plan, which has already been agreed to have £120,000 worth of spend in the first year put into it. Page 51 shows the types of communication changes we will be making and types of communication plan that will take place. And this isn't just a one-off plan, it will be a continuous ongoing strategy. And this comms plan and strategy alongside any new policy will first go to the waste working group, should it be agreed tonight that it can continue. As I've stressed, Leader, this has been done with a recycling first focus and focus to maximise our recycling opportunity. This was not making about savings, but COVID has had an impact on our finances. Members will be fully aware from the numerous times this has been discussed and that has to be factored in. And this leads me to 2B, Leader, and the changes since the last report. Whilst tonight, obviously, I am fully supporting and asking Cabinet to support 2A. There was a comment and recommendation 1.3 shows this in relation to the possibility of a garden waste charge. Again, I stress the severity that COVID has had as an impact on our council finances. This was discussed in last night's corporate ONS meeting, and it has to be taken into consideration the impact that not just the Environment Service, but every service has to do in order to try and help the MTFS position. However, Leader, I believe member feedback is the right thing to do. I've highly commented this evening on how when politics is put to one side, members can come together to devise a strategy done for the right reason and with the right intent. The fact that Labour, Thurrock Independent and Conservative members in the working group have come together to deliver a strategy promoted 2A shows that good collaboration does work. And thus, I will be asking for option, obviously 2A to go forward and not for 2B. And any report, should 2B be a consideration for the future with a garden waste charge, will have to go to scrutiny before any decision would ever be made coming forward to Cabinet. I stress that again, there is no garden waste charge being proposed this evening, and if it ever was to be proposed, it has to go to the overview and scrutiny first before any decisions can be made by the Executive. Leader, I bring forward this report as I truly believe it is being done for the right reasons. This isn't about savings, this is about improving our recycling. For the first time in a long time, all three main parties have come together, worked together and delivered something that can see significant improvements to our recycling service. I truly hope parties who have had a significant role in this, Labour and the Thurrock Independents, continue to work with us over the implementation period as their feedback within the waste working group is invaluable. Leader, going through the recommendations this evening, I'll go through them as follows. 1.1 would be to agree the strategy itself, removing references, obviously, wherever they do, to 2B. 1.2 would be to agree to option 2A, which is in line with the waste working group. 1.3 is to engage with the CGS committee, as already discussed this evening. And 1.4 and 1.5 are equally key because these are the extension to our existing contracts during the implementation phase, and then to allow for the new contracts to be commissioned. And then this lastly brings me on to 1.6, which is the recommendations which were brought forward by CGS. I firmly agree with and expressed this already to the current chair of the Waste Working Group. This is in relation to 1A, but this isn't a group just set up to put words on a paper, but to continue to have a substantial input on the journey and beyond. It's key during the implementation period for members to continue to have a say, and I fully support the continuation of the Waste Working Group. In relation to 1.6b, this is in relation to a policy which was discussed within the Waste Working Group. I know Councillor Byrne has a deep love and desire for this, and I completely agree that this is the right thing to do. I can announce that work has already begun on this, and that work will be taken to the Waste Working Group should it continue. And Leader, lastly, 1.6c, and this is in relation to a request about consultation. I'd like to stress that this council has already administered a thorough consultation to all residents back in the early part of 2020, and a substantial sum of money was spent on this. However, I can say, and as I've already said, the council have earmarked £120,000 to be spent on the first year's comms plan, which will ensure every single resident will be fully informed as to the plans. These strategies will be brought before the Waste Working Group with their input and comments collaboratively brought together, whilst we continue to collect questions emerging so that they can be answered and, where needed, policies created to support. I actually therefore request that we reject it on this grounds this evening, but I would like to create a new recommendation, which would be 1.7. That is, but subject to the approval of 2A, which was agreed from the cross-party working group, in recommendation 1.2, this council commits to launching a borough-wide communication strategy to go forward to the waste working group to demonstrate how £120,000 will be spent in the run-up to the 2022 implementation. I once again thank the cross-party working group for their work, and as ever, I'd like to thank the staff for the fantastic job they do, both in particular throughout the initial pandemic lockdown and also in this lockdown now.
Well, thank you, Councillor Watkins, and thank you for your report and explanation there. I've already got one hand up from Councillor Howden. Councillor Howden, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you, Leader. Just to say, it's not often you can improve a service with such a straightforward approach. You know, waste services is something that every citizen uses. Therefore, most councils choose not to reform services like this. But I think the cross-party working group can be really proud of the work that they've done. The paper, as evidenced from the experience of other local authorities, does outline that you can dramatically increase recycling rates by protecting weekly recycling, which we're doing, and alternating the others, and getting ourselves to the point where we can get over 50% recycling is something that is great for all of us in terms of building a greener borough and a more sustainable community. And there are fringe benefits for the taxpayer. There is a saving to be made, not to mention any possible penalties that we avoid if we continue to slip backwards on recycling in regards to the national target. So I see this as a win all around. Now, the working group chaired by the Labour Party, Councillor Fletcher, supported by Conservative members and supported by Councillor Byrne, the leader of the Independent group, they should be proud of what they've achieved. Option 2A, which we're going with this evening, their recommendation from all parties proves that different political parties can come together and they can have professional conversations and come to a amicable agreement about what is the best thing to do for the public. One thing I would say in terms of the communication strategy going forward, as the Cabinet Member for Social Care, obviously I'm concerned about medical waste. I've spoken with the team and I'm very pleased with how well, as a borough, we do handle the issue of medical waste, because there is a personal distress. It does cause to residents to have to ask for such a service. The team do fantastically well, and I'm very pleased to see how those specific points have been built into the communication strategy to make sure that people do know how they can approach us and how we are always able to help with issues of medical waste, and we will be with option 2B. So obviously I want to thank the cross-party working group and obviously thank Councillor Watkins, because hopefully the paper that Councillor Watkins has presented this evening is going to be the most successful shake-up to recycling that certainly that we've had in the decade that I've been an elected member. So I think this is good news, Leader, and I fully endorse option 2A.
Thank you, Councillor Howden. Being of that age, he says with a heavy heart, I can remember it going from tin bins to a small plastic recycling bin to the 3-bin system that we have now, which obviously we're again trying to improve. So it will be a bit of a shift change for residents. That's understandable. But certainly a move for better recycling is always a good thing. Councillor Hebb.
Evening all, can you hear me? Councillor Watkins, thank you for your report, and like you've already aptly underpinned, I think a large thank you to the cross-party strategy group who have come together, discussed a very difficult subject, stuck with it, and have reached a conclusion and held firm. It's good to see cross-party strategies that can get to a point where there is full collaboration and a recommendation which is largely universally supported. I was just reflecting a bit on Councillor Howden's points around the environmental elements. This isn't, like James has said, this isn't just about ticking a box because it's good for the environment, and it isn't just about hitting the KPI, although a 14% uplift is remarkable. This is a very volatile market. So when waste is collected, there are a lot of market variables in that which drive cost, as Councillor Watkins will know from my discussions with him over a number of months and years in terms of the collection rates and so forth. But the other thing is the world is changing. I think Councillor Clayton made that. Manufacturers are now driving market product changes to ensure that single-use plastics or plastics with a more recyclable material within them are part of their key packaging material, and they're doing that for a reason. This isn't just about ticking a box. This is a massive modal shift, and this is an opportunity. And going back to the recommendation about councils setting and leading the way, for me, it's about working alongside a market which is already evolving and being an ambassador for that as well. So it's as much about hitting a number, it's as much about ticking a box, but it's also about that there is a massive modal shift out there. The world cannot sustain what it is producing in non-recyclable material. The private sector have got it, the public sector have got it, and this is actually a good opportunity for us to work in unison to deliver and drive that. So, again, my hearty well done for the work done by Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Byrne, and the entire group. And just to echo your own points, Councillor Watkins, as residents of the borough, we are very thankful to the people who perform the jobs for us on the roads, whether it be sunny, whether it be windy, whether it be rainy. We do very much appreciate everything that they do, and I know that we're obviously working with them to make sure that they're fully involved in the work that's going on. So, no, just to echo your points, and just to congratulate the working group for putting forward a very sound proposal and an underpinning strategy, which is fit for purpose for years to come.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watkins, you want to come back on that one?
Thank you, Leader. No, I just wanted to really stress a couple of points which are raised by both. Thank you very much for the comments. But this is a clear example of cross-party work together. I think, as described, it's a subject that affects everybody. It affects every resident, and that's the reason why we wanted to have this discussion, rightfully so, between all members. And obviously spearheaded by the group, so that it could be a collaborative process whereby two members from each political party had the ability to come forward with various different ideas in a collective group together and bring forward a strategy that would obviously go forward to CGS first of all, and then come forward to Cabinet. And this was originally created with no purpose about where the future was going to be. The only purpose was how can we improve recycling rates within the borough, and how can we have that individual impact which can affect everyone and ensure that everyone has that say. And they've come forward with, as mentioned, a brilliant strategy. And this is a strategy which isn't just for today and tomorrow and it gets replaced in a couple and that's it, and it sits there and being used. As it was described, this is a fluid document which will always see change and will always see improvements made to it. I've already stressed that as part of the comms plan, we want to ensure that we pick up the feedback, that we hear what the questions are from the residents across the borough, and that we answer those appropriately, and where possible, create those policies. The medical waste conversation has already been had. It literally came to me the day that the original papers came out to CGS, and within the space of an hour or two, that conversation was already being had about how medical waste can be done in this new strategy, both how we currently do it, but also how can we improve them upon it. And I think this is one of the key elements. It's not just one change here or one change here. here, and okay, recycling is going to stay weekly. Well, how can we improve everything we're already doing as part of that strategy? And this is why I honestly believe that the working group does need to continue over the coming months during this implementation period, so that they can continue the great work in which they've done, and rightfully so, that they can continue to question and thoroughly robust comments about the way things are moving forward, in particular with that common strategy, so that they rightfully so, all three parties have a say on how that goes and anything else they wish to discuss moving forward with it.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Anybody else got anything to add? If you'd just like to raise your hand, an opportunity for that to happen. No. I'm going to echo what's already been said in thanking the cross-party working group for their input. This is weekly bin collections has been one of those things that's been raised politically time and time again, as has the charging for the discretionary brown bin service that we provide. We have to look what's happening across the country. Obviously, we're not the first to do this. I'm sure we won't be the last to sort of go to some form of collections that's not weekly, albeit just with our waste that's being collected every fortnight, but with obviously our recycling still collected every fortnight to help drive that up. It works elsewhere. There is no reason why it shouldn't work here, and it'd just be really good to see this be implemented. I would like to specifically thank actually Councillor Byrne in relation to the single-use plastic aspect. He bent my ear very successfully right at the beginning of lockdown 1 in relation to this, and I could see his point straight away. And I know the services are implementing changes in relation to that to stop the use of single-use plastics for our notices that go up on for our public notices. But it can't stop there. Obviously, once the lockdown's over and we start to, reattend the offices, there are services that we provide. There are things that we do where we do use one-use plastics, but that will need to come to a juddering halt and quickly. Aaron, you've got your hand up again. You wanted to come in, or was it late in the hand?
No. I just really wanted to stress one thing, and sorry, I didn't pick this up initially in my speech and some of the comments, was obviously sometimes miscommunication can go out there. And again, I just wanted to stress for anybody listening to this that residents are still going to have weekly services with their collections. They are still going to have a weekly recycling collection, and they're still going to have a weekly food collection. And for the residents, and again, this is picked up in the second appendix, which has been distributed this evening, there have been questions in relation, and quite rightly so, to larger families, families with babies, etc., and how does that happen? Those questions are already being worked upon, and the Appendix 2 shows how that conversation is being led, how that policy is being created, and how we'll be able to accommodate for those families across the borough. So I just wanted to stress that I know there has been some questions raised about that, but that is very much part of that focus, and this is where we're picking up that feedback and then using it to shape the policies moving forward.
Thanks, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Maney?
Thank you, Leader. Sorry, I know this is a bit of a late contribution. I wasn't going to speak, but I think it's a point worth making. I remember once upon a time when I was on Cabinet a few years ago, we used to be able to get data which showed recycling rates on a wall-by-wall basis. Now, I'm told for whatever reason we can't get that anymore. But at that time, and I don't believe the picture has changed that much, recycling rates varied wildly according to which area of the borough we were talking about. I think it's important for us probably not to come at this on the premise that 34.76% is reflective across the board. I would stake money on, if you get into the Alsets, the Corringhams, the little Thurrocks of this world, where they're a bit more discerning, that figure is much, much higher. Yeah, if we get into other parts of the borough, like the Tilburys and the Chadwells, the recycling rate plummets. And I've made this point before when I've been on ONS, but I think it's something we should consider here, and I hope it's something the working group can consider. I think we really do need to look at, as I say, I know we can't get that data anymore, but we must have feedback from our collection crews and there must be ways of looking at recycling rates by area. I really think we need to look at those areas of the borough where probably recycling is very low, not run around the Orsets and the Corringhams and the Fobbins and places like that, telling people who already do a diligent job when it comes to recycling what they should be doing. If we want to get that figure up across Thurrock, I think we really need to concentrate on those areas of the borough where they're a little less caring about these kind of things and try and drive up the rate there. I think we should remember that in some parts of our borough, people are very diligent. And when we look at this list of local authorities that are up in the 60%, I wouldn't mind betting that in places like Orsett and Little Thurrock, we're close to that anyway. We're being held back by areas where the message just doesn't filter through. So I hope we can look at how we can focus on those areas where, if the data from years ago is still relevant today, they just don't recycle as much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manley. Oddly enough, you just raised something I was going to say before closing. We do. It is quite clearly apparent as as we travel around the borough. Back in the olden days, when we used to travel around the borough during election times, which recycling bins would be full, and which ones would be where the waste is full, pretty much very full. And indeed, when you start getting into those flatted areas, excuse me a second. When you start getting into those flatted areas where they don't have the opportunity to recycle, just because of the way their waste is collected, then there's a lot of room for improvement. But Councillor Manley, I think, is quite right. We perhaps it's something you need to feedback through the not just through Cleaner, Greener, Safer, but also through the director to see what we can get, to see where we can target not only the messaging that we're sending, but also target the help and assistance to make it easier for people to recycle everything they possibly can. As my voice is beginning to wane again, there are a significant number of recommendations on page 18. I would normally read them out, but Councillor Watkins, you made very clear that we will be voting on 2A, which will be the only one that we need to do, and indeed your amendment on the final recommendation. Can I move these as read for the whole of Cabinet? Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Again, obviously a collective nodding of heads. So with that, thank you very much, Councillor Watkins, for that. And we'll move to, the next item, which is Councillor Howden and the reductions for council tax reductions for those who are looking to become foster parents. Sorry, foster parents. Councillor Howden.
Thank you, Leader. Can everyone hear me? Wonderful. Well, Leader, this is certainly one of the proudest moments I've had as a part of this Conservative administration. Tonight, we're doing something very bold and very important. We are taking our Thurrock-based foster carers out of council tax altogether. That is something very few councils do. That is something that means a massive tax cut of circa £1,600 per year for a Band D property. And it is the biggest single investment we have ever made in foster care. And that's even on top of the pay increase that we have already granted this year. I've had the pleasure of meeting quite a lot of foster carers. And about a month ago, I met an amazing foster carer in Grays. He's worked with a very special young man for the last 10 years who has always struggled quite a bit at school, but is fantastic, apparently, at music. Well, music tuition is not exactly cheap. And what I wasn't able to tell this amazing carer at the time was that hopefully this Cabinet this evening will be delivering a historic tax cut for him. This isn't going to mean the world, but it will be a big help for households like that. Now, the aim of this policy is to ensure that we grow our base of Thurrock Council carers so we can always provide our young people, but more important, with the support they need, but more importantly, grow our base of carers in Thurrock so young people can remain in their own communities, surrounded by the support that they need and deserve. Now, this policy is going to be funded by addressing the large premium that we pay for independent agency foster carers, because we're currently not well enough catered for in terms of the sheer numbers that we need with regards to Thurrock Council foster carers. The current bill of these independent carers versus the Thurrock Council placements is around £2 million. That's £2 million of additional costs that we can begin to address this evening. By incentivising more people locally to care for us, we can reduce our reliance on such expensive placements. Of course, there will be stipulations. For example, people need to comply with the staying put policy. This means making sure that young people are still supported in their foster placement up until the age of 21 and not just discharging their duty when that young person hits the age of 18. That pastoral care element is incredibly important to us. However, of course, we will sometimes need some placements outside of the borough due to needing to get a safe distance for that young person, or because we need to find very specialist care as a result of medical requirements. So as a result, independent or external placements are always going to be a part of the toolbox and the placement sufficiency plan. In addition, while this exemption will apply to Thurrock residents who foster for the council, it's also going to apply for those who currently are Thurrock Council foster carers but not currently living here. And we've also built in an override band. So if you've got an exceptional circumstance, some of the examples that I listed above, officers can use their own discretion to give this support to other foster carers as well. And the plan is, Leader, for this to kick in April of next year. This is a massive boost for the homes of vital key workers and some of our most special children. I'm extremely grateful for an incredibly talented directorate led by Sheila Murphy and Joe Tynan, and I'm very, very heartened by the support I've had from the Cabinet, from yourself, Leader, and certainly from Councillor Hebb and the finance team, who have made sure that the plan stacks up. So with that, Leader, I will simply say that the actions of this administration this evening are making sure that there has never been a better time to foster the Thurrock Council and become a part of that wider Thurrock family, supporting some of our most special young people. And with that, Leader, I'm happy to open to questions or comments.
Thanks, you, Councillor Howden. Councillor Hebb.
Thanks, Leader, and Councillor Howden, thank you for the report and for the officers who have put so much work to this. James, it feels like a long time ago that your team met with my team, and we talked about this in its first infancy state. And for everyone else's awareness, we walked out of that meeting knowing in our heart that this was the right thing to do, but we needed to make sure that in our minds it stacked up as well. And as work continued through the summer and the autumn, it was quite clear that not only could we do something, quite inspirational in terms of creating better life chances, better retention levels in the borough through a more localised fostering arrangement. There was also a key saving element behind it as well. Now, that's not to say that IFAs are anything other than caring, capable, and so forth. However, Councillor Howden hit that point on the head earlier. The ability to locally retain people who need to enter these arrangements is a bit of a benefit to them, because they get to stay in their locality, usually close to the neighbourhood in where they've started to grow up or are growing up in. And frankly, for us to be able to do this, it stacks up from a mass perspective. But going back to the heart piece is actually a really good thing for our younger people in the borough. So, Councillor Howden and the social care team have absolutely led on this. The finance team were happy to listen, and we got excited when we listened, and we were then therefore happy to engage and work alongside. The success is largely driven from, or completely driven from James and the team, Wish it all the luck, and I know it's going to do well. You've got some illustration in the report tonight which articulates where that's been successful elsewhere. That's really heartening, and looking forward to this being rolled out and making a difference. It's really good to be able to say that. So well done.
Thank you, Councillor Hebb. Councillor Mace.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Hebb, for this report. I find it absolutely fantastic that we're doing this for foster parents. My parents were foster parents in Thurrock for 40-something years, and I was brought up with foster brothers and sisters throughout my life, and it is a challenging thing. And often people think, oh, well, they get paid for this. Well, actually, the money goes on the children, as it should do, and just having this extra little bit that we can say thank you for the hard work that they do, because it does take a very special and loving person to not just love your children, but children that are not yours, and they are often from very challenging backgrounds. So to bring them in, give them the love and environment they need, is fantastic. So to support them, I've got to say this is one of the best things I've seen from when I've been following local politics, to be fair, because this really does hit me right on the heart. And I've just got to say thank you for this, and your team, and everybody that hopefully will bring this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mays. Any other member? No, as Councillor Howden alluded to in his report, when James came to me with the idea, as a former council tax enforcement officer, so knowing council tax very, very well, you sort of think, well, how much of a difference is £1,500 for a Band D property going to make to someone who is fostering? And actually, when you sort of turn that around to actually say, well, actually, it's not about that, because as Councillor May said, for this, this is absolutely, this is a thank you for their service to the community. But if this means that we have more of a homegrown foster placements in Thurrock, it means a massive saving for the tax base as a whole. So, it's an invest to save prospect. But again, when you start looking at it just from a money point of view, you lose sight of what this really, really does. And Councillor Hebb alluded to it as Councillor Howden did in his report. This means that local children that are in a position where they need to be fostered for however long that period of time is, are more likely to be staying in Thurrock, in the places where they're at school. They're going to get those much better life results. And quite frankly, if £1,500 makes that more likely to happen, then we can't even think about the money on that front. We just need to be saying, this is going to be giving much better life chances to these children that end up in foster homes for whether it be a short time or a long-term foster situation. So there is absolutely, literally nothing but benefits from this, which is absolutely great when James came through the idea, I was literally sold on it straight away. But more so as it's gone through. So it's just good to see it finally happening, coming into place. And it's also worth remembering, of course, this is one of the many things we've tried since I've been leader, certainly to drive up the number of foster carers and foster parents we have in Thurrock. But we can review this every year. So if this isn't working, then we can look at something else. Because the council tax exemption, as it's a discretionary exemption, gets renewed every year. We can vote on it every year. So if it's having an effect, absolutely brilliant. And if it isn't, then we can look to something else. But it certainly gets my endorsement. So I'm going to move to the recommendation on page 61 at 1.1. And again, I don't really wish to read it out loud, as you can hear my voice is going. But is everybody in agreement with the recommendation as outlined?
Agreed.
Agreed. Excellent. Thank you all for that. And then moving to item 13, which is the mid-year 42 April to September corporate performance report, and over to excuse me, Councillor Hoolin for your report, please.
Thank you, Leader. This is the mid-year performance review covering April to September this year. I'm very pleased to say that 76.7% of services are achieving target. That's pretty much 30% higher than our opposition managed in a normal year, yet alone during the pandemic. This great level of service is thanks to the amazing teamwork we see here in Thurrock, and hats off to all council staff who should be congratulated for not only maintaining targets but improving on them whilst getting used to working differently and often from home, or finding innovative ways to continue providing services. For instance, whilst libraries have had to close again, librarians are running a kind of click and collect service whereby you can telephone or go online and order books to collect or get some time on a computer. Having fresh reading material when you're on your own or isolating can be vital to a person's well-being. Naturally, some indicators have been affected by COVID, like the lack of recruitment events leading to a reduction in number of apprenticeships started, and face-to-face waiting times. Obviously, at council offices, we can't record them because we've had to close. It's impossible to predict how long some services may be affected, but we will continue to monitor the situation. Residents can, however, rest assured that service levels are being more than just maintained during these difficult times. This report has been through the cross-party overview and scrutiny process, and there were no recommendations made to Cabinet this time.
Thank you, Councillor Hooling. Has any member? Oh, excuse me. Has any member got anything to ask, Councillor Johnston?
Thank you, Leader. I just really want to say that within my portfolio, I'm really particularly happy to see that, you know, with all this terrible times we've been having, the percentage of repairs completed within target have maintained a very, very high level. I'd like to congratulate the people within that department and area for carrying out a fine job during these really, really difficult times. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Any other member got anything that they would like to add, if it's either in their portfolio area or in general? I see no hands, which is in a way good. Obviously, as Councillor Hooling quite made quite clear, you know, recording waiting times and stuff at the council offices is just an impossibility, as we've got technically no waiting times. But again, on the occasions where I've been into the office, obviously up until the second lockdown, occasionally we would see members of residents outside the council offices, either expecting them to be open or to try and get a service where they've not managed to get through. And I would urge that any resident who is not so much not getting the answer they wish, but it's not getting a response, if they could obviously email through, if they've got the ability, or indeed to call our ordinary switchboard number to be able to register the fact that they've not had the service, so we can trace that. I'll be honest with you, probably in the 20 or 30 times that I attended the office between the two lockdowns, that only happened once or twice. But in my opinion, there's still one or two residents that have been not got the service that they deserve or required. So it's just a general caveat. But certainly looking at the indicators that are in red, some of these are going to be unavoidable during this time. Some of them are, excuse me, on the up. So, for instance, the one I always look at, because it's in my area, which is the payment rate of fixed penalty notices. Yeah, that has seen a dip this year, down to 50%. So I can assure people, if you do get a fine, we will chase you for it. So you know, to take the opportunity to pay it as soon as possible, and then get that out of the way, rather than it ending up in a court case later on for non-payment. But I certainly remember having conversations with Councillor Maney many years ago, when we used to have the traffic light system, So it was nearly met or didn't meet or did meet. Now it's just that simple. Either we hit the target or we didn't, which is a much tougher target to hit. But Councillor Main and I used to joke that it seems that for every 3 balls that the council have got in the air or 4 balls they've got in the air, they're dropping 6. Now that's down to literally for every 10 balls they're juggling, we're looking at nearly 8 of them are being kept up in the air, with a couple of them sometimes unavoidably falling short of the mark. But it is something that's good to see, and especially to maintain during the difficult period that was the bit between 2 lockdowns during this pandemic. So again, a thank you to all those staff that have gone above and beyond, to all those staff that don't even feel that they've gone above and beyond. They just carried on doing their ordinary duties, but in a different way. I can assure you it is appreciated, because we do feel it's gone above and beyond. Very recently, the past 3-4 days, I've had a number of residents sending thank yous for prompt service from the environment teams, which is absolutely great to see. I saw one today where part of our test and trace facility, the council contacted the resident who was had a positive test to make sure that they had everything they needed for lockdown, or whether they needed support. That's not just doing your job, that's going, in my opinion, above and beyond. So the officer who did that, I'm going to publicly thank, and I'm sure it's not the only time it's happened. I'm sure it won't be the last time it happened. So with this and the general well done, if there's nothing else to add, I'm going to move to excuse me, the recommendations as outlined on page 69, which are 1.1 and 1.2. Again, I'm not going to read them, but can I take those as agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Excellent. Thank you for the thumbs up and nods for those that I could see. Oh, excuse me. So thank you for your report, and just try not to cough. My apologies. So with that, I thank members for the first fully online cabinet that we've done. Obviously, I'm hoping that by the time we have our next cabinet, we'll be out of lockdown and we'll be able to hold meetings in person again. And with that, I'm going to call the meeting to a close at 20:06. I'd like to thank you all for your time, and indeed for any residents or those that have been watching this online. Thank you all very much, and good evening.